I am going to forego the bios on these folks. We all know them. They all do a great job in Brazoria County for us. Representative Randy Weber is in his second term in Austin, representing the north end of the county as well as Matagorda County. Dennis, who is in his, y'all grab a seat, 8th term, is 8th, correct? 8th term in Austin, representing the southern end of Brazoria County, which come January 1, they're doing a little bit of swapping due to redistricting, and Dennis will also pick up Matagorda County, and the lines are going to be fairly close on the north end. But what we're going to do is allow folks to ask questions. Hopefully transportation. You know, nobody get off onto A&M going into the SEC. Did think about asking Senator Williams about that, but we're going to try to concentrate on transportation issues. So we've got Larry Bueller's got a microphone. I think we've got a microphone. Mr. Mahan's got a microphone on this side. Questions for our representatives? We need some questions, guys. We've got one right here. We've got a microphone coming up, sir.
We know the Panama Canal is coming. We know it's going to bring us trucks. How in the world are we going to deal with that when we're trying to get 3/4 of Pearland to the medical center to work every day? So that's the question.
Well, I don't know if you were here earlier when Judge King talked about 36, and Lake Jackson is the largest city in my district, and I'm excited that the 332 project is occurring. But if someone had made me king and given me the power, I would have had that be the 36 project and not the 332 project, because the reason Lake Jackson wanted the 332 project was to not have trucks come through the middle of their town and be an issue. Well, the way you could have solved that is have them on 36, and they never would have come through town. They wouldn't have just been a little higher. And so that would have been the greatest solution. Obviously, that solution has passed us by. But it then does also come back to where those trucks are going. Some people hope and believe that maybe Highway 6 might be a place that they'd head off to the west. Obviously, people would hope that maybe they'd hit the Beltway and start going around in those directions. But it's a great question, and I don't think there's any magic wand answer to, but Representative Weber may have that magic answer.
Are you kidding? I couldn't even get this microphone to work. My one wasn't doing very well, but you're right on track.
All right, did we get your question answered? Okay, and we've been joined by Senator Joan Huffman, who represents part of Brazoria County. She is in her second term in Austin and represents the county extremely well. We are blessed to have her. Senator Jackson can't make it, so you're carrying the load on the Senate side. All right, any other questions? We've got one back here, Robert Worley.
Texans send more out than we get back. Do any of you up there, anybody in the room know if there's any effort going to try to get more of what we pay back?
We griped and griped and griped, Robert, during the legislative session, the last two legislative sessions, and we even looked at numbers, quite frankly. The Texas Conservative Coalition ran the numbers on how much money do we send up there versus how much do we get back. We thought about perhaps maybe the proposal should be that we tell the federal government that we'll build our own highways, we just won't be sending them any money, and that if they would show a photo ID at the border of the state, we would let them drive through our state. But we literally looked at those numbers. There was that discussion being held. It never came to fruition as far as making it to a proposal, but trust me, that's on the legislature's mind.
Well, and the reality of it is, I look around this room, I look to my right, and I see some other friends in the audience, and the real question comes down to the man or woman who will be our new congressperson in Washington, D.C., because at the end of the day, the Texas legislature can discuss it all we want, but we don't get to decide how the federal government better divvies those dollars out. With that said, I know there's been an effort also on the federal level to reconcile the fact that we are a donor state, but I don't think there's been any major success to that. With that said, I'd be shocked if any of the people wanting to be the next congressperson for this area wouldn't agree that Texas ought to get more of that money.
I really don't have anything to add. I agree. It's very unfortunate that we're a donor state. It's not fair. It's not right. But I think that the state legislature, our hands are pretty much tied to what we can do to help that. We'll be counting on our new congressman to help us with that, and hopefully, I think we can look around at the current administration in Washington and realize they're not going to do Texas any favors. So I wouldn't think anything's going to happen in the near future unless we have some changes. That would be my personal opinion.
Great question, Robert. Thank you. Do we have additional questions? Mr. Bueller.
Maybe a couple of comments from each of you. I know we're in between legislative sessions now. I know we've got the update on what came out transportation related. Do you see anything else that, from a legislative standpoint, working through TxDOT and some of the things, the reorganization that's kind of going on, that might be some type of little silver lining or little positive thing that could happen for transportation?
Well, I can say that I was at a groundbreaking yesterday of segment E of 99. I realize that's not good news for Brazoria County necessarily, but it is good news for the Katy, Fort Bend area of Harris County and Fort Bend County. So, we've heard a lot that there's not going to be any new construction or there's no funds, but at least in this situation, that segment is due to be completed in a couple of years, which is, a little bit more of the Grand Parkway or 99 being completed as we very slowly make the big circle around the general Houston metropolitan area. So I think there's a little movement of all the dollars that were allocated in the projects. Half of the money in the state went to this area, much to the chagrin probably of the Metroplex and so forth. So we all know, and I haven't been here all day, but I'm sure Senator Williams told you the money is tight, and I'm sure he gave you a really good update on some of the plans and the ideas that are being implemented with the bonding and so forth to try to get some movement, something done as we struggle through this economic downturn and the state's coffers being pretty low. But so I'd say slow progress, but a little progress.
Thank you, Senator.
Good question, Larry. Dennis and I were just trying to remember back. There was 3 projects that wound up on the TxDOT sunset bill that we were able to get in there. I was able to get 288 on as an amendment. We wound up with 290, 249. The truth of the matter is, that's in this region. It's not all the way across the state. The truth of the matter is we're going to have to rethink the way we do financing. TxDOT did get the legislature's attention this last, actually 2 sessions, and not in a positive way, and we reorganized TxDOT. We realized it was broke and how it had to be changed from the top down, and so we went to work and did just that. I think we need to educate our citizens because there's a lot of talk about the new Comprehensive Development Agreement, CDAs. People think that that's an automatic extension of the Trans-Texas Corridor. It is not. And so there's some education that has to go on. Toll roads, for example, on 288, where we get them over the middle lanes, might be a viable alternative if we can sell that to the public and make them understand that that's probably going to be our best shot at getting that congestion alleviated. Now, the problem with that is I don't see County Judge Ed Emmett in here, but he's been quite poignant in his statement that until we get flyovers downtown where 288 and 59 and 45 all come together, until we alleviate that traffic coming off of 288, then Harris County's probably not going to, we probably can't count on them buying into a 288 project. But we got to rethink the way we're doing things. We've reorganized TxDOT. We're going to have to educate consumers, get them to vote with their dollars, as the previous speaker said. And I think if we do that and get CDAs in place, then there might be a light at the end of the tunnel.
I think all the comments I would agree with. They're good comments. I think the 288 CDA and the sunset bill is a good example. Representative Weber, as he mentioned, he put it on as an amendment on the bill. Being Vice Chair Sunset, I was on the conference committee, and so we were able to work together as a team and ensure that that stayed in there. The bill, when it passed the House floor, had, I think, 21, 22 CDAs. When it finally passed, it had only 11, and it was by working together. And I say that because I think one of the biggest issues is that you all know the dollars are going to be short, no matter what we do. You heard Senator Williams talk about his strategy to create, I think it was 17 billion more a year. Well, 17 billion more still doesn't get you to 300 that we're short for existing needs. So we have to have a very good cooperation among local governments. And my point would be is I've seen some local projects that have kind of fallen back on the list at times because there's been disagreement. And everyone has the right to. I want to be clear about this. But, you know, one city says, we're not sure we're comfortable with that. Well, the message is tough because the reality of it is TxDOT's attitude is, I got a list of people begging. So if you guys want to say we're not sure, no problem. I'll go to the next guy begging on the list right behind you. So one of the things that I think is absolutely vital is that, and we do a good job of this in this county, but that we really are together. Because if you don't have a good unified from the most local level of government through the list, you're not going to succeed in getting those dollars. And then the final thing I would say, and I think we're stepping in the right direction, but until the public has a belief and trust that TxDOT's worth a damn, we're not going to be able to find and create more dollars. You know, the public trust and perspective of TxDOT was extraordinarily low the last couple years. I think that that's improving. I think there are reasons it should be improving. And so when that gets better, and it is getting better, there will be more viability to find dollars.
Thank y'all. Yes, sir. Mr. Treesh.
I'll give you another question. In my many years of experience, I never thought, back to the federal issue, never thought that FAA would not be funded for 2 weeks. Continued resolutions are fine, you know, whatever it takes, but apparently we've now got a situation in Washington, almost anything is possible. One of the ideas I will throw to you that we could possibly handle at the state level is if FAA is not funded for some period of time, same thing could happen the end of this month on the federal highway and transportation funding. If we don't get a continuing resolution of some kind, the federal tax might not be collected. I would offer to y'all that maybe during the next session, there'd be a bill, and I don't even know if this is legal, but let the state, but I don't really care about legalities. But maybe the state could collect, if Congress won't do its job, the state would, instead of jumping in and not sending the money to Washington, we'd collect it and keep it here, at least for the period of time. And if Texas and enough other states did that, maybe Congress would do its job. That's great. I like that. So anyway, any comments or thoughts that you might have on that rather weird solution to a problem?
No, I like that notion, Mr. Treesh, quite frankly. And y'all will correct me if I'm wrong, but after Hurricane Ike, FEMA money was so slow in coming that we set aside, was it $200 million to be able to step in and supply and to fix things while our constituents, whoever they were, cities, whatever, were waiting on their FEMA dollars. then the state had a fund that we could step up and we could supply that money and then depend on that FEMA money to come to us as a repayment. Perhaps what you're talking about is something like that on the highway funds. So it's not that far-fetched. Whether it's legal or not, you'd have to talk to Greg Abbott.
On first blush, it sounds like there may be some problems there, I would say. But it's an interesting idea and one we could certainly look into. All right.
I think it's another one of those cans that keeps getting kicked down the road a short amount of distance each time. Do we have another question over here?
Yeah, my name is Michel Maksoud. Ever since the bottom dropped from highway funding, we've been talking about, okay, how can we find funding? Okay? It's not financing, it's more funding is what the issue is. And anybody who I talked to talked about educating people. Because you go to these functions, who would support a tax increase? And everybody raises their hands. Everybody that I know in these functions said education. Education. We need to educate. I haven't heard anybody say, I'm responsible for education. Who's responsible to educate the public? Now, you've asked, not you personally, but people in general have asked organizations such as the Houston Partnership, so on and so forth, well, you guys need to go educate. Well, fine, I mean, if that's what it is, but see, it seems like educating 80% of the people is going to be more of it's a big task. So I don't know anybody, or I haven't seen anybody that says, this is how we're going to go about doing it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm quite sure it's the city's responsibility.
No, in all sincerity, I mean, it's everybody's job. I mean, I think the model I would use is, how does a school district pass a bond election? It's a grassroots effort. It's a local neighbor-to-neighbor, leader-to-leader communication. And we all have a role in that. Now, I think the question you're asking is, who's going to step up and say, let me help lead that? And I think that's a fair question. I think that, with all due respect, most of the people in this room have the most to gain and the most to lose by nothing happening. So I would argue it'd be the folks in this room, not to point the finger, I'm in this room, so I'm included. We're the ones who need to come together and make the effort. Now, I also believe that some of the times we fall short because we think that maybe the project on the north side of Houston is going to be the one that finds the dollars and not the project in Brazoria County, so we're not as excited. And we can't have that view. We have to have the view that as soon as money's in the system and that list starts getting ticked off, it's kind of like the old salesman gets the door slammed in his face and he walks away and says, great, I'm one step closer to my next sale. We got to take each project off that list and you're one step closer to your project in your community. But I think the answer is it's all of us. And candidly, the synergy exists in this room. It's the leaders and those educated and expert in transportation. And Senator Williams gave you start polling numbers of people. I don't know if they called any of these folks on their cell phone while sitting in traffic or not, but you heard the numbers, and I think it's for all of us to do it. With that said, I know there are a lot of engineers in this room, and I've said this to some engineering groups I've talked to. Y'all are in an awkward spot because I know y'all take the cause up in a heartbeat, but the problem you run into is people say, well, you're just trying to take care of yourself. So I think it is the local and on-up level community leaders, the chambers of commerce, which are leaders in their community, but it's all of us doing it together. And I think the Great Eastern Partnership is a good organization to help start some lead, but I think we need to be doing it here in our county also.
And let me add, Mayor Martin is here from Manville. TxDOT came in to do, had public hearings on Highway 6. You remember, Mayor, where they were putting esplanades in. And I attended, and City of Pearland had TxDOT in for their plans, and I attended those hearings. And how many citizens would you say were there? 6 or 8? you know, they've got to get interest. Now, hopefully with the downturn in the economy and the lack of funds and the congestion getting worse and worse and worse in our area, hopefully their interest is getting peaked, so maybe that's changing.
Senator Huffman says she agrees with this side. This excellent question. That is what today is about. Today is an educational opportunity for a number of folks in this room. And one of the things I want to point out, I've noticed we have more members of the press than probably any other thing in the county that's gone on. We've got from the south end to the north end press covering this event, which I think is great and hopefully will help get some of that word out. So, excellent point. You do have to educate the public, and I think some of that will be done today. And as Mike Wilson said in his talk, go out, find a few other disciples to help spread that word. So we've got another question over here.
Mr. Weber, you had mentioned something about there is some confusion amongst the public, the difference between CDAs and their confusion with the Trans-Texas Corridor. Dennis, you had mentioned in a meeting once before, of course, that it's widely known that as we continue forward with the future of infrastructure, toll roads are going to be more and more utilized around the state. What is the state doing to try and help educate the public? Because I do know there is quite a rather large sentiment against the PTC, and if there is a confusion there, what is the state doing or can do in order to clarify that, because toll roads are inevitable in our future?
It's a great question. I think you're going to hate my answer. If you're counting on the state to make that education, you're going to be counting for nothing for a long time. You know, I would never ask the state to be my marketing firm. And so I wouldn't anticipate that the state is doing anything of great significance. And quite candidly, it's the comment I made earlier where the engineers are in a tough position on some of this. You know, the agency and the functionality from the state would be TxDOT. So I don't think the public's going to be too trusting and excited at TxDOT marketing the fact that a toll road or a CDA is completely different and non-connected to the Trans-Texas Corridor. And so, you know, I mean, you see now with Governor Bush running for president, the Trans-Texas Corridor is what did I say, Bush? You know, I've been fighting a cold. My wife gets mad at me because I won't take cold medicine during the day because I say it kind of makes me loopy, and she says, well, you're that way usually. So, so I'm going to start taking it. But anyway, but with Governor Perry running, you're seeing that discussion. And again, I think directly to your question, it really comes back to the previous question of who's going to lead the effort of the overall education, because the reality of it is it's not a separate issue. It's an issue of how do we do transportation in the future, and with all respect to those who hate toll roads, I don't love them, but it's about an acceptance of a reality, which is if you want to move traffic forward in the coming years, you can either allow the legislature to increase the funding to TxDOT, which means we have to increase revenue through some mechanism, or you can decide that toll roads are a good idea. Those are your options.
Jim, that's a great question. The problem is that Trans-Texas Corridor is too recent behind us, and it was a bad job of selling the idea, and the internet has helped promulgate the problems associated with that. People gripe because they say you're giving Texas land to a foreign entity. Of course, we all know that that's not the case. You know, somebody that puts up billions and billions and billions of dollars is going to expect a long-term contract to be able to come in and operate that facility to get their money back. So we're having to dispel those myths, if you will, and having to dispel those ideas. We will probably be dealing with that for a long time, and I agree with Representative Bonin that having the state do it's kind of a tough row to hoe. You know, the local communities, this organization, the Greater Houston Partnership, the 288 Partnership, and others, you know, Brazoria County, or Economic Development Alliance, Brazoria County, and the list just goes on and on and on. The media being here is a way, but for the state to do it, I hope we get past that soon, and as people get fed up with it more and more, maybe we will more quicker.
I would agree that I think that there is a very deep distrust from the public in general. A lot of it based on the Trans-Texas corridor, and that fear remains when you talk to some of the grassroots organizations, or just you're out there at town halls or talking to your constituents. There remains that fear that somehow it's still, well, quote unquote, hidden in the law somewhere. I was one who was not a fan of the Trans-Texas corridor, didn't like it, didn't like the concept. I'll frankly say that. But I think we have to clearly move beyond that and make some wise choices of what we're going to do in the future. We have to be able to convince our constituents that they need to get over the fear that there are ways to do this and move forward in the future and forget about the Trans-Texas corridor. And until we're able to do that successfully, I think it'll be difficult to move forward in a way that really moves the question forward on toll roads. That would be my thought. And maybe you guys, have y'all experienced that as well?
One quick comment, and I'll analogize it to the football coach who's not winning. When he comes out the next season after going 0-10 and says, this year our boys are going to be great and they're going to win, you go, yeah, right. Well, when you're counting on the state to say the Trans-Texas corridor, really it's dead, trust us, we're not, frankly, the ones that are going to listen to you. What the joke in the House was this session, I was on the Transportation Committee, is that every session for the next 10 years, we'll probably file a bill saying the Trans-Texas corridor shall cease and die immediately. And we'll do it every session, and we're all going to sign up and go, look at what we did. Because until the public, and candidly, the way you change these policies is through public sentiment. I can't change it. I mean, think about it. When we did the revised franchise tax, how did that happen? The business leaders of the state came together and said, we need to fix the system. We need to improve it. And basically, they told the legislature some good ideas that they believed we should be considering. And that's when the legislature really got to a solution, which we still need to work on. But the reality of it is, these major issues, you're not going to have a legislative body just go and do it and say this is what we did. You have to have public support from the local level rising upward, telling us go do X, go do Y, get your job done, do it this way. And candidly, right now, what you're being told is, I don't want to don't get caught in a dead car on the side of the supposed Trans-Texas corridor.
And Dennis makes a good point. The policy that needs to be changed for you have to give the opponents of the Trans-Texas corridor, which I was one of the idea along with the senator, they were able to marry the idea of Trans-Texas corridor and toll roads and eminent domain all together. And who wants more eminent domain? And so until we can divest those two, where just because there's going to be a toll road, it doesn't mean we're resurrecting the Trans-Texas corridor. If we can just unmarry that concept, that might be a start. That's the policy we ought to be aiming at.
Good comments. I think we've got another question over here. It wasn't a question. It was a comment regarding communications and marketing and how you get things out. Use your Chamber of Commerce, use the internet, and those type of things, especially with our younger generation, and that they don't utilize newsprint like they used to. They don't watch TV like they used to. Believe you me, I got 17 and 21-year-old. What they watch, it's not educational. So it's just a comment in regards to
specifics.
I'll help you out.
Yeah.
We have another question right here.
We've got one more question, and we're rolling up to 4 o'clock. After this question, then I'm going to ask for some closing comments from each of these folks. Yes, sir.
This was a pretty optimistic report by everyone today, and yeah, I think it was mentioned that the unemployment rate was still hovering above the 9% rate. If everything goes according to plan, I'd like to get y'all's take on where you think it might be in 4 or 5 years when some of these developments really get into high gear.
What would be the unemployment rate?
Yeah, a revised unemployment rate, yes, for this region.
I'll tell you, that is a tough question. I don't know if, okay. I'm going to give it to Dennis then.
If I had that answer, I'd be running for president. I have no idea. I hope it's lower, but I don't know. Randy may know. He's running for Congress. He probably knows.
Thanks, Dennis. You know, what was it Yogi Berra said? The problem with predictions is you're dealing with the future. So, you know, your guess, quite frankly, Dennis is right, is probably as good as any of ours. I will say this. If we don't change the present administration, the present business policies or lack thereof, it's going to be bad for a long time. If we don't get somebody in there that cares about business, that cares about promoting businesses and changing policies and regulatory climate, we're going to suffer for a lot longer. And and let me just tell you, folks, hang on. I have to believe that help is on the way.
Okay. All right. Thank you. It was a good question. I'm going to now ask for each of these folks. Y'all don't understand, I think, some of you may do, the pressures on their time. So having them able to join us today is a pure blessing. And so I'm going to ask for a closing comment. I'm going to start at the top of the pecking order with the Senate.
Thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm sorry I wasn't able to spend the day with you. You know, we have many challenges in Texas, and I'm sure that was the theme today, although I wasn't here and didn't hear Senator Williams. I've heard him speak on this subject before. And, you know, we kind of have mixed blessings in Texas. The good news is that we are a growing state, and why is that? It's because people want to come here, because we have it better in Texas. Our economic climate is better than almost anywhere else in the United States, if not the best place in the United States to live. And so people keep coming to Texas. We know we hear maybe 1,500 people a day move to Texas. So what does that do? It puts a drain on our educational system and on our infrastructure. So, you know, we have a lot to deal with. Sure, we had a budget shortfall, but a lot of that was because of our population growth and, of course, because of our decrease in revenue because of the economic downturn. So we have challenges ahead, but again, you can look at it as a glass half full or a glass half empty. We should be happy that we're here in Texas, and I hope that we can work together to solve some of these issues. You know, politics is a stark reality here, though, and you know, the state, the overall population of the state and the political climate, there is no appetite to raise revenue. I think we all know that, and we want to learn to live within the means that we have. We know we have required to have a balanced budget in Texas, so we'll always have that as the kind of, you know, the outline of where we start and where we work. And I think it's important. We all know that we need to improve the infrastructure in our state if we want to continue to grow and meet the needs of the state. But I'd be the first to say that it's going to be a heck of a challenge in the next few years to get that done. But I hope to be there working with everyone to try to accomplish what we can to make Texas better than it is today. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Senator.
A couple quick thoughts. This last session, I guess, was my 8th, and any significant changes, and I don't want to pick on Senator Williams with him not present, but you know, he talked about his bill that would have increased some fees specific to driver's licenses so that we could improve what was going on in those offices. You know, the problem that he forgot to mention is that was a bill that was sent over there to do away with sanctuary cities, which was a major immigration issue across the state that we greatly supported doing away with them, that he took those components out and then put the fees for the transportation offices, the DPS offices in, and so the House was a little disturbed by that. But more importantly, it was not something that had been greatly discussed and broadly presented during the session to the public and to the committees and to the legislators. And so that's a problem, but let me step forward. Now what's happening is people call me weekly and say, I just waited an hour and a half, and you know, I'm not so bothered, but it was the little old lady in front of me who was outside the office in Angleton in the heat for an hour and a half wait, and that really concerns me. What in the world are you going to do about this? And I asked them, would you pay $20 more for your registration fee if we could fix that problem? And they go, well, hell yeah, and you need to do that. Here's the point. Had we gone ahead and done that with little discussion with the public and little presentation, they would have been after our heads. Now the public is starting to say, why didn't you do that? And guess what? Then we will. The public is extraordinarily powerful, and I say that with the greatest respect. In my 8 sessions, changes of finance and of dollars and of increased revenues, they almost always derive from public support. Never do we ever just go and do it. It comes from public support. And I'm starting to now see the public saying, get rid of the lines, get rid of the antiquated system, do something. And if that means I pay more when I go sign up for my license, so be it. But fix this problem, please. And that relates to transportation. They have to trust what you will do with it, and they will have to see that there is a serious need, and then they will demand it of us. And I wish I could tell you otherwise, but we will wilt like flowers in the heat and do whatever the public wants in those situations.
You know, Winston Churchill said that Americans always do the right thing right after they've tried everything else. And that's probably doubly true for Texans. After we get through bragging about biggest and best, and we buckle down, we roll up our sleeves, and we go to work, and we do the right thing. Our economy is going to come back. The administration is lightening up on its regulations. How many of y'all saw with the EPA, they were starting to talk about less regulations? Yes, they're getting our message. They are getting our message. We're going to see that Texas will grow. We will roll up our sleeves and go to work. We will get people like Dennis is saying that are going to get fed up, and they're going to get the message loud and clear to the legislature. So maybe in 4 years that you ask about what's the unemployment rate, we're going to be back to work. We're going to be moving because our federal policy will be back in place. So I'm optimistic. I think that what you're going to see is a change. You're going to see a turnaround. Maybe y'all heard that the congressman was it New York that replaced Anthony Weiner in a 3-to-1 Democratic area was elected Republican. How many of y'all heard that? I think people are voting now and they're saying, you know what, the policies that are in place are not working. We recognize it's not working. It's time for a change. So I think you're going to see a change. I'm excited to be part of it. Stay tuned.
Thank you. I'd like to thank each and every one of you. There's a small token of our appreciation for y'all being here and joining us and sharing with us. I know the pressures on your schedules are tremendous, so thank you very much. Got one last, Carol Archbuchek, if you'd like to come forward, please. While Carol's on her way up here, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for being here with us throughout the day. I'd also like to thank the EDA and the Council of Chambers for putting this event together. I know the tremendous amount of work that y'all put in to make this happen, to get the speakers that we had today, our legislators, was a lot of work, and I think that there was a lot of news shared with folks today, hopefully the start of some of that educational process, and I'm hoping that we can do this again next year. So thank y'all very much for the work that y'all put in.